This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
Could Jesus intend for us to learn from even our enemies? And if he does, how would we get to the point where we would want to? These questions and more are all part of today's conversation on Family Life's Inside Out, where we focus on how God transforms his people from the inside out. I'm Martha Manikas Foster, and my guest to talk about becoming open to learning from anyone is former campus staff worker and pastor and current professor and urban farmer, I've learned, Dr. A.J. Swoboda. Dr. Swoboda parents, directs academic programs, teaches, writes, farms, and occasionally fits Inside Out into his schedule. Welcome back, A.J.
Martha, it's great to be back with you. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on the April release of your newest book, A Teachable Spirit, The Virtue of Learning from Strangers, Enemies, and Absolutely Anyone. I'd like us to focus on that middle one, the enemies here in the subtitle. Jesus was pretty clear about how his followers should treat enemies, but it's my experience that somehow when we think it's important enough, we can act like we have permission to dismiss and even denigrate people we don't agree with. So before we talk about what we can learn from our enemies, why do you think we would even want to?
It's funny. I've been asked that question a number of times, and it's never dawned on me since you asked that right now. It dawned on me, Paul's statement about our identity before we came to Jesus. He says in Romans that while we were enemies of God, he came and loved us and saved us in the midst of being enemies. And to be a Christian is to learn from who was your enemy, Jesus. I've never thought of it quite like that. But
Epiphany, yay.
Yeah, the Christian story is that you were an enemy and you chose to allow the enemy to love you. In a way, Martha, I think we live in a contemporary cultural moment where we are celebrated, we are affirmed for creating little social bubbles where we surround ourselves by people that think and believe everything that we do, politically, theologically, whatever. And it's an easy thing to do. The only problem is sometimes we're just wrong.
Yes.
And from time to time, I'm not saying that all of our enemies are right, but from time to time, God, I think, is going to send someone that might upend something that we think. And I guess the question is that why would we want to learn from our enemies? Because Jesus loves to use surprising people to form us into his image.
What a great answer. Yes. And probably all of us, if we were to take time to think about it, have learned from people who were not the people we thought we would learn from. Yeah. There's this really interesting story I read a number of years ago. Back in 1945, there was this treasure trove of ancient Gnostic, basically ancient heretical writings known as the Nag Hammadi texts. It was one of the most important archaeological finds really in the 21st century. And when they discovered these texts, they compared them to the early church fathers that were spending much of their career disputing them. So they had the chance to actually compare the Orthodox, the Christian writers, and the heretical writings. And what they found in comparison was that when the early church fathers would quote their theological enemies, they would always go out of their way to quote them accurately. They would never twist what they were saying. They wouldn't twist it to make a point. And I think that goes to something about the Ten Commandments. Do not lie, right? Do not bear false witness. And if that's true, you don't even bear false witness against your enemy. You even represent your enemy well as an act of love. We talk about an extreme form of love. Yes.
To rightly represent the person that you perceive to be your enemy.
What integrity, right? Now, you've already mentioned that we gravitate to people who think or believe like us. In fact, we kind of collect people who think and believe like us. And you remind us in your writing in this book that Jonah, for instance, was not all that keen on following God's instruction to go to the enemy city of Nineveh. But we also have examples that we do hold up, to admire, like Lincoln, when he put together his political rivals as his cabinet secretaries. And you point out that the church father, Thomas Aquinas, believed we could learn from those who disagree with us. So, AJ, what would be good about, what might we learn from engaging with people who think about God and about culture differently than we do? And how might God use this to develop us, not only as people, but as believers in him, in Jesus?
Yeah, great question. I have a debate in one of my classes, my Intro to the Bible class. It's a group of students that have, generally speaking, never read the Bible before. And I ask them to answer a question. Should we today, in the 21st century, should we still read Adolf Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, which was his anti-Semitic rant against the Jews of his time, essentially his ideological pivot towards trying to annihilate an entire people group.
Right.
And I asked my students, should we read that? Because it's a maniacal evil book. I mean, it's through and through sicker than sick. Should we read it? And we always have a fun debate about this. And some students would say, we should never read it. We should burn it, get rid of it. But then other students will say, actually, we should read it. And they'll argue that there might be some reason why we should. And I always land on the belief that even a book like that, which is, again, maniacal evil through and through, there is significant value in us today choosing to read the writings of our enemies. And the reason is, I'll put it this way, it's impossible to annihilate bad ideas unless you know them. It's impossible to actually have a level of defense if you have never actually thought through the ideas of a particular person. Of course, the image is a little bit like an immune system. The only way that you develop your immune system is you've got to inoculate yourself with some version of the sickness itself. And that's how we develop an immune system. So I would say, Martha, that as Christians, reading people we disagree with is part of God's way of developing our immune system.
And that's how we do it with the dead, as you talk about surrounding ourselves with the dead as well as the living. But like when we're talking about every day, not maybe somebody who is the archetypal opposite of us as a sparring partner, but the people that we brush shoulders with, or we could every day, but we choose not to brush shoulders with, what would we benefit from this kind of enemy, engaging with that kind of enemy?
Yeah. I think the benefit of engaging with those sorts of enemies is that we're obeying what Jesus said when he said, love your enemies.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you.
Yeah, Dallas Willard famously said that the single thing that you can look for in a person who's been formed in the image of Christ is that they're people who spontaneously love their enemies. And they don't have to think about it. They don't have to work at it. It's become a part of their virtue. It's become a part of the genetic makeup of their life. The spontaneous love of enemies is, I would argue, I think Willard's right, it is the sign that the deepest work of God is. So why would we pray for our enemies? Why would we love our enemies? Sheerly obedience to the living God. I'm pretty sure that this is a distinctly Jewish Christian ethic. I don't know any other religion that has as its cornerstone the belief that we are not to kill our enemies, but love them and pray for them. I don't know if that's found anywhere else. It's a unique Christian virtue.
And we can grow in that by continuing to be in contact. Because if it's a spontaneous virtue, right?
You can't love somebody you don't know.
Yes.
I mean, it's impossible.
Yes.
Yeah, so to love your enemy implies that you've got one.
Yeah. And
so you got to have one in your life in order to be able to love. So I'm not saying that Jesus is saying create enemies so that you love them. But it's almost like that. I mean, he's speaking to the true, real human experience, Martha, that we all have. We all have people in our life, neighbors, family members, friends, coworkers, people that we maybe used to really get along with, but now we just see so differently, and we don't see eye to eye at all together.
Right.
Those people almost always, at least in my life, are almost always the ones that make me have to grow up the most.
Now
and
there you are.
They form in me the image of Christ. It takes no effort to love somebody that you agree with on everything.
Sure.
That's just a great way to create a club.
Yes.
It takes actual character to love your enemies.
There you are. Oh, yeah. So now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty. Rubber meets the road. You and your mom, okay? I'm sure you love each other very much, but you've learned that you can love and respect people like your mother who, on some topics, it sounds like, thinks very differently from you.
Sure.
What is it that you learned that we can learn from?
That I don't need to agree with my mom to love her. I tell a story in the book about a pretty significant political disagreement that my mom and I had a number of years ago. And as we spent one night just sparring over our differences of political thoughts, it dawned on me that my mom actually came into this conversation with a tremendous amount of thoughtfulness and integrity and character. And I think in many respects, Martha had kind of written her off because she thought differently. And clearly I'm right. She's not deep. I'm deep.
Right.
I know my stuff. But really what it exposed in me was a deep-seated bias that I assume I'm the one person in this conversation doing it with integrity. Mm-hmm. And what I learned from that conversation was that even with my mom, who I disagreed with vehemently on a topic, at the least, I walked away from that conversation honoring her process for getting where she's at. Mm-hmm. It's impossible. You can't honor without relationship. And relationship means you actually get into what you think and believe. And I learned from that experience to choose to assume competence mm-hmm. in my mom, mm-hmm. to assume that she's competently handling things that I think very differently about. Again, I don't agree with her on, mm-hmm. on a variety of political issues, for example. But at the least, I honor my mother for the process by which she got to it. And that is, I think, part of honoring the Imago Dei in each human being. We may not agree, but we can at least honor the fact that the person we're disagreeing with was made in the image of God mm-hmm. and is in many cases trying their best.
Sure. Certainly, if we feel derision toward that person because of what they think or what they're expressing, we're not being what we aspire to be in that moment. So, mm-hmm. yeah. So, one last thing, AJ, would you put on your pastor's hat for us and send us out with practical ways to engage with people that we disagree with so that we may actually indeed live as children of our Father in heaven? We could maybe aspire or assent to this, but sometimes in the day-to-day, just that sandpaper every day. And there's reasons, I think, in our culture right now to see the worst in others. So what would you send us out with?
Yeah, I mean, this is not going to be novel or new, and it really aligns with pretty much everything I've said. But back to this idea, in a world where we create echo chambers and surround ourselves with people that we agree with, Paul even mentioned that one of the marks of the end times was that people would surround themselves by people who itch their ears. I think we're at the end times. I think we're pretty close to Jesus' return. Now, we have been for 2,000 years, and we'll probably be for a while longer. But, Martha, I don't think it's scandalous. I don't think it's going to rock your boat. But I think if all of us could find one person, one singular person in our job, our coworker, a family member, somebody, one person that when we look at, we go like, gosh, they think so differently. They are so wrong on that topic. They are so wrong on this and that. If we could just find one person that fits in that category and spend the next 10, 15, 20 years and try to advocate for their flourishing by loving and praying for them, it will have an impact on us that will, I think, take us to heaven. I mean, it is a kind of character that is formed in us that you don't get by watching a video on YouTube, or you don't get by just reading a book or listening to an awesome radio program. Mm-hmm. And this is Christianity on the ground when we choose to love an enemy. And it is probably the hardest thing in the Christian life to do. But have one person that represents that quote-unquote enemy and embrace what Jesus told you to do. Mm-hmm. Love them and pray for them. Be in their life.
Wow. That's hard. Thank you for the hard assignment. Well, thank you again for another really wonderful book, and thank you for joining me again on Inside Out.
Thanks, Martha. It's always a joy to be with you. Appreciate it.
I've been talking with author and Bushnell University professor, Dr. A.J. Swoboda. His newest book is titled A Teachable Spirit, The Virtue of Learning from Strangers, Enemies, and Absolutely Anyone. I'm Martha Manikas Foster with Family Life's Inside Out.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.